Can you hear me, Matthias? I'm assuming this is working, but we're just testing to see if anyone can hear me. Yay! Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. This is just a quick hangout that I had promised to some of the guys on the Gitter chat the other day. We were talking about debugging and using PHPStorm to make this process easier. And I was trying to explain it, but I thought, it's easier just to show it. So I thought I'd fire this up and give it a go. And I've never used this Hangouts Air thing before, so it's interesting. I was assuming there would be a way for people to speak, but I guess there isn't. Not like a regular Hangout. And the QA thing doesn't seem to work. It says feature is disabled, but anyway, there's a chat on the side. You can, if you have a question for me, just ask in the group chat on the left. I'll shut down my my email and stuff, otherwise we're gonna get pestered. And did it shut down? Okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna get started, and feel free to ask the questions there if you want me to stop or pause or whatever, and I'll go back. So what I want to do today is just quickly download one of the Grav skeletons and then debug it. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the getgrav.org website, and on the download section we have these skeletons. What these are, if you don't already know, are like ready to go one-stop packages that include demo content, plugins if required, etc. It's kind of like a rocket launcher if you're used to the Joomla rocket theme, rocket launcher things. So I'm going to use the demo site here, or the blog site, sorry, and I'm going to download that skeleton, and we'll stick it in my downloads folder. I'm just going to extract that, and I'm going to call this Grav Hangout, and I'm going to drag this into my workspace folder. Workspace is my web root. So start up a new window here, and I'll just go Grav Hangout. And as you know, Grav doesn't need any installation. There's no databases, whatever, and it just works. It just loads. So that's the Grav install I just downloaded. This is the blog skeleton. So the first thing we want to do is we want to launch PHPStorm, which I already have. And I already had this open before, but I'm going to just do it fresh just so you can sort of see. So go workspace, and I have a lot of Grav sites. Grav Hangout, use that one. So just load it up. Just going to do a little bit of indexing. Sure, automatically detect my roots. It's fine. So this is the folder structure. And the first thing I always do when I'm developing local is I want to turn on my debug bar. So I'm just going to go in there and do that. So user config system is the override config file for my debugger. And I'm just going to say that, put that onto true. And then if I go to my browser again and I reload, I have my debug bar. And just real quick, if you haven't used this, you can see different tab windows. So these are messages, and you can put your own in here in the code and plugins and whatever. I have some default things in here telling me what's going on. So my environment is localhost, and basically there was a config mismatch because I modified a config file, so it basically reloaded and recompiled the config and rebuilt the pages cache too. So that's why it took a little bit longer. If you refresh a couple more times, you'll see it gets faster because there's config cache hits and page cache hits and so forth. But we have other things in here, so you can inspect the request timeline, any exceptions that happened. Here's the config, so you can see what's going on. You can inspect these arrays too. This is pretty handy. And also the twig, so you can see what's going on with the twig, which there's quite a lot going on this page because we've got all this sidebar stuff going on and the plugins and things firing. So what should we do first? First of all, I need to make sure I have Xdebug on. Okay, so PHP-V, I don't have Xdebug. Now, I don't know if you guys have followed my my blog posts about installing Apache and PHP on Yosemite, but I have a couple of blog posts here, and there's two of them in two parts. They sort of walk you through the process of using brew to install different versions of Apache. So for example, I have this ability to type SPHP 5.6 and put my password in, and now if I see I'm running 5.6, so, or SPHP 5.4, and now I'm running 5.4. And also part of that blog post outlines this useful script for turning Xdebug on, so I can turn Xdebug on like this. Now PHP-V, and you can see I've got Xdebug. So this allows me to switch between different versions, turning Xdebug on and off as needed really quickly. So Xdebug's on. I want to do some debugging. So let's go here. Let's close that panel. And I use Chrome, and there's a little extension called, I think, Xdebug Helper. Where is it? Xdebug Helper, and you can just install this from the Chrome store. And yeah, this is what it looks like here, Xdebug Helper. And basically that has some options. You can change what the IDE key is. I've changed this to PHPStorm because I'm going to use the one-click debugging, or whatever they call it. So actually, there's like no configuration needed on PHPStorm side. So you just set that key, and that's all you need. So I think what we'll do is we'll debug a plugin, and I'll just pick random as it's a relatively simple plugin. So if you open up the random .php file, you'll see the events. So let's just debug this first event. So this event is fired for all plugins as the plugins are being loaded into Grav, and we'll sort of see what happens here. So all I've got to do is this little phone icon up here in the top right, start listening for debug connections. When that thing is green, that means that it's listening. So I just go to my browser. I've got my debugger helper set to debug, so it's basically set up correctly. Oh, the one thing that I'll do also is actually, you know what? I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to turn off the page cache. It's not going to make a difference here, but it's just sort of safer to turn off caching while you're doing debugging, unless you're specifically testing the caching, because you might get some strange results or not hitting the breakpoint and so forth, because things are cached, and it just can cause some confusion. So I'll just turn it off. I'm going to go back to the browser. I'm going to turn this off. Actually, I'm going to turn it off here real quick in PHPStorm, and then I'm going to test this functionality first of all. So the particular plugin that I'm testing is the random plugin, and basically what it is when you hit this random URL, Grav just looks for a random page in some filter that you've set, and will send you to that page. So normally what happens, I just hit random here, and I got sent to random thoughts. That's actually that's not going to happen every time. It is a random page, so it's going to be a random blog post out of the sample blog posts that are in this. So you can see each time I hit the URL, it's going to a different one. Okay, so I want to debug this. So let's go back, turn the debugger on. I've got in my random.php file, I've got this breakpoint. So in the gutter on the side, this is where you set breakpoints. And I'm going to set it on the first one. So now I hit reload. Okay, first thing it did was switch to PHPStorm, and it prompted me to say, okay, there's an incoming connection. This is just sort of the pop-up for the no config debug. It's got to know your entry point into your project. So I'm just going to pick the first index.php file as that's my entry point. And there you go. So it stopped on the breakpoint, and you can tell it stopped because it's got this big blue background behind, and also the checkbox is there. So you can see here are the variables at this point, and on the left is the frame. So this is the stack of how the call was made. So you can see it came in on index, started with this Grav process call. Then inside of Grav process, there's this event on plugins initialized. And yeah, there's a little fire event wrapper here, but and then we have the event dispatcher, and all of that sort of trickles down into this on plugins initialized event inside of problems. I mean, inside of random.php, sorry. And then you can use these buttons on the debug panel to step through your code. So this is a step over, and you can just step over here. So you can see that just went to the next line. So why didn't it go into this first if statement? Well, you can also set up watches, which is pretty handy. So you can say this is admin, and I can see that was false. So that's why it stepped over that, because it was false. And also you can, if you were to step over this, you'll be able to click on the variable, and you can sort of expand it and whatever, and you can see it. You can see it down here too, all the different bits of this particular URI object, and also of course this object, which is the plugin. You can see that everything assigned to it. So you can step through your code, and I wonder if, okay, so let's go one step further. So I'm on this line, and I want to know what's going to happen inside of this URI path method call. So you can use this button here, which is step into. So it'll step into URI path method, and you can see what's going on here. So I can see that inside here my path is /random. Okay, that's expected. It's going to return that. So I can just keep going, and I can see that because this path is the one that was configured for the plugin. I'm not really going to explain how everything works in here yet, but the plugin here has a configuration option to say, basically, if the path is /random, then do the work inside this plugin. So that's what's going on here. It's basically saying that the route for this page is what was configured. So then enable this new event on page initialized. This methodology inside of the plugin allows us to optimize the plugin. So they all will run this event, but then they sort of can determine if they should run or not for the rest of the logic. If I want to just sort of continue step through, I can see that. And what I might want to do now is say, okay, now I know that it's going to run. I may want to say, okay, I want to pick up this particular debugging effort at this point. So I can actually use this button, which is basically run to cursor. I don't know why it's not telling me that on hover, but it will there you go. So it'll basically keep on running and it'll stop at that point where I have my cursor, which is really handy. I don't have to set another breakpoint. You could set another breakpoint here and you could hit basically run, resume, and this will run to the next breakpoint too. That's a bit cumbersome. It's nice just to say, hey, just run to here. And I can see here, for example, on this particular method, it's basically doing some work with fine taxonomy. If I were to step into this, it will step into the fine taxonomy function. So I can step into it, and here I am in fine taxonomy, and I can step through, and I can really see what's going on. I can see it's looping through taxonomies. So okay, with my taxonomies there, and I'm looping through there. This just makes life so much easier, and you can add as many watches as you want, and if they're not relevant, they won't display anything. But you can really determine what's going on and save yourself a lot of time. You don't have to be putting Xdebug statements or print statements or dumping to a log, etc. And then you can just run, and it'll just go to the end. Now, one thing to note, you may get an error like this. This is normal. This is just because Xdebug has sort of messed up the whole PHP processing. It's not a big deal. If you just turn off the debugging, turn off the debugging here, and then you reload, everything's back to normal and it's doing random stuff, etc. It just sometimes there are problems within Xdebug, and it sort of loses track of its place and so forth. So not a big deal. Okay, so let's just do one other thing. I'm going to close my debug panel. I've got my my cache off, and I want to show debugging of a bit more complicated type. So what's a good way to test this? Maybe okay, so what I'll do is there was a new feature that we added in the last version of Grav, which basically allows you to control publishing with a bit more granularity, and you can set a publish date. And let's see. So this is the Sunshine in the Hills blog post. So if I went back to my blog, this is the one that's showing right now at the top. So it's the newest out of the blog post, and it has a date of 7/11/2014. But I'm going to set a publish date to be 01. And what is the day today? 14. All right. So I'm going to set this to be tomorrow, 2015. So with a little luck, this will not display because it's set to be start publishing tomorrow. So yeah, so that's the case. So if I wanted to debug how that process worked, I could go into the system folder, which is where all the core Grav stuff is. And if I go into common page object, this is the main object within Grav that's handling a lot of things. So the init function inside of here has this set of checks for how the publishing dates are handled. So if I want to set a breakpoint there to see how this page is handled, I turn on debugging, and I go back here and it's on, and I hit the reload, and of course it breaks to the right spot. I don't know why sometimes it switches to this console tab. If anybody knows why that is, please let me know, because it drives me crazy. I gotta go back to this debugger tab. I hate extra clicks. But anyway, it broke at that point, and if I look at the object, oops, no, I'm on the wrong one. Hold on. Okay, well, this actually gives me a good opportunity. So it broke at the random plugin because I still had a breakpoint there. You can click this button on the left, which is view breakpoints, and I want to basically delete this random breakpoint there. That's an easy way to manage your breakpoints. So I'm going to hit play, or resume, sorry. And so now it broke at the appropriate place. I'm in the page. I'm in the Grav common page, init function. Yes, that's right. If I look at the object itself, you'll see that this is not the right page that I want to be on. So I hit go again, and it goes to the next time it's in this page, and you can see actually what's going on. This is actually happening in the build pages method, and it's recursing through every page that Grav knows about. And I can see that this is the classic modern architecture page now. If I hit resume again, this is focus and blur. Okay, so if I had many hundreds of pages, this would be a really annoying process to get to the one page that I'm trying to find out if the publishing date stuff is working correctly. So I can right click on this breakpoint and I can add a condition. So I can say this, so break basically when this slug equals sunshine in the hills. That's the slug for the page. And now I can resume, and then when it breaks, because it's going to go through all the other pages, and then it'll only break conditionally when that statement, and you can hover over and see what the statement was, when the slug is equal to sunshine in the hills, and you can see that's exactly what's gone on here. Slug is sunshine in the hills for this page. This is the right page, and I can see this is the page with my publish date. So when I start stepping through, I can see how this logic's working. So this is, there's a publish date set, and modified. It's the date is different from the modified date, and it's in the future because it's greater than time. And you can see that, okay, in this case, published is being set to false correctly, and I am setting the cache lifetime to be that of the publish date, so it knows to refresh the cache, the page cache, after the publish date has occurred, and that means that it will recache in the new state, which will be published true. So that's all working. So that allows me to to be able to debug relatively complex situations where I only need to test a specific state, and you can set up quite sophisticated conditional statements that way. So that's really the whole process of debugging with PHPStorm. If you're wondering how I set up the debugger, I really didn't. PHPStorm has this ability to do this zero config debugging. There is more sophisticated debugging setups, especially if you're doing on remote hosts, vagrant configurations and so forth. But there's a whole raft of stuff, and I try not to mess with this stuff too much because it can break all the debugging and everything. So I try and leave it alone if possible, because it is quite sophisticated. But I think for the basic kind of debugging, it's really not needed. The zero config debugging works great. The only issues come up if you have a lot of symbolically linked aspects to your project, and this happens for us quite a bit because we will have Grav set up in a single location, and all the plugins are set up in a single location, and then we'll set up these test sites that symbolically link the plugins and the core Grav, etc. And PHPStorm can get confused, so you have to set up mappings for those for those files, so it actually knows where they are and it knows how to debug them. But once you've set up those file mappings, it works just the same, and it's pretty easy to use. And I know that we've been getting a lot of questions. Why should you use PHPStorm when other editors are prettier and nicer? And I agree. I don't like the Java-ness of this, but the functionality that it brings is just so good, and the debugging capability is amazing. So it's just worth it. And there's a lot of really cool features within PHPStorm too. Like if I wanted to go, if you command click a particular method call, it jumps to that method call. So you can really jump around your code a lot, and you can see where all this stuff's coming from. So it really makes finding out what's going on and how to write better code, it makes it much easier. And then of course you can you've got all the capabilities of a regular modern text editor too. You got multiple cursors and so forth, and also it's got the ability to hook into validating of your code syntax. So if I were to foolishly put opening bracket, I don't have it turned on this project. There is, I have to see if I can find it. There's a whole thing with it being able to do validation inspectors. So I can say code style. So I can remember how to turn this on. There's a way to do it. There's a way to import from PSR. Maybe it's just, no, it's not that. You can set it so that, I have to look this up again now. I did not, I did not research this, but you can basically tell it to inspect using, oh, there you go. I had something filtered. Code style. Yeah, you can configure all of the inspection stuff, but yeah, I don't know. I don't remember how to do that now, but there's a way you can say that it'll validate with PSR 0 and PSR 1, whatever you want to do. It's very, very powerful. This PHPStorm has got all kinds of functionality, and I barely know how to use half of it. But I mainly use it for the debugging anyway. So that's it, unless anyone has some specific questions about something that I might have stepped over. I don't know if you know, but you should be able to click on the group chat icon in Hangouts if you're connected via Google Hangouts, and then ask a question there. But if not, I guess that's it. So I don't see any questions so far, and I'll launch Gitter, see if anyone on there has questions. So, oh, this is really big. If you guys haven't used this yet, this is a Gitter chat, and it's how we chat with the folks. It's pretty nice. It's a free service, and it basically hooks into your GitHub project, so you can see the activity and everything on the side. It's pretty neat. Repo info. Nope. Okay. Okay then. Well, I guess I don't have any questions, so I'll shut her down. Thanks for stopping by.